So hello and welcome to the final panel. I will be talking about UI and UX in Shiny apps, and part of the talk will be also a live coding session using our packages shiny.fluent and shiny.react. So I didn't have a chance to introduce myself at the beginning, so just very quickly, my name is Kamil. I'm a full stack engineer at Appsilon, and I helped develop these two packages that I will be speaking about. So yeah, let's get started. First of all, quick look at the agenda. We'll start by speaking about what is UI and UX. Then we'll overview the technologies which will be involved in the coding session. Then I will tell you how to get started if you want to use the packages yourself. And finally, we'll do the live coding itself. So first of all, UI stands for user interface. So all the styles and components, all the views and interactions that you might have with the page, this is the user interface of your application. User experience is how the user feels about the application, whether they can accomplish their goals, whether they like the interaction with your application, and so on. And user experience of using your application is largely determined by its user interface. And there are many qualities of a good user interface which determine user experience. And today I will be focusing on beauty and familiarity. So first of all, let's review the technologies that will be involved. So there is React, which is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And secondly, there is Fluent UI, which is a UI library from Microsoft, which is based on React. So here, React is the underlying technology, which we do not need to know too much about, actually. But this is the core, which is the basis for Fluent UI, which itself is a set of components and various styles which can be used to build an interface which looks and feels like other products from Microsoft. And based on these two technologies, we have two packages which we recently released called shiny.react and shiny.fluent. So shiny.react is the low-level machinery which allows us to use React in Shiny. I won't be speaking about this package directly, but it is the core on which shiny.fluent rests. And shiny.fluent is basically a wrapper for Fluent UI. For the component library, and it is based on shiny.react, it allows you to use Fluent UI without really knowing anything about React and JavaScript, at least unless you want to use really advanced functionality. So I will be speaking mostly about shiny.fluent. And first question, why would you like to use it in your applications? So first of all, what you get is a professional look. And this is this beauty and familiarity which I was speaking about. You get a large set of components which have a look and feel which kind of fits together and allows you to create an interface which will look like something developed in Microsoft and something that will fit really nicely into other applications in the ecosystem. It's not always what you want, but if this is something that your audience looks for, this is exactly the package you need. And secondly, you get familiarity. So the components that you will use, they will be easy to be interpreted because they are the same that you can see across the whole operating system. So secondly, when using shiny.fluent, you're able to get seamless integration with R and Shiny. The whole point of the package was to enable users to write an application using Fluent UI, using pretty much just R and Shiny without getting into the details of the underlying technologies. Thirdly, when you use the package, you get full power of Fluent UI. So it's not just a set of few components, it's actually full set, whichever components you want to use for Fluent UI, you will be able to do it. Only for the more advanced components, it might be somewhat difficult, but it's still possible. And lastly, there is extensive documentation available. So first of all, each component has its own example in R how to use it. And also the official documentation of Fluent UI itself is really extensive and helpful when you want to dive deeper and develop something big. So how to get started if you want to use these packages. Currently, they are not yet released on CRUN, but with the help of remotes package, you can actually use these two comments to install those packages. You can find these comments in the README of the GitHub repository, or you can also go to the official page, which I will mention in a moment. The instructions are there as well. And the resources which are really useful when doing anything with these packages are listed here. So first of all, there is the online reference, which is the same help which is available in R or RStudio built in with the package. Secondly, there's a demo dashboard, which I will be using also to show you all the components. It's basically an application which is also a showcase for all the features that you can use. And lastly, the official Fluent UI docs are also super useful, even though they do not speak of R, but rather the underlying React library. And after getting used to it, you can really use it to understand better what you're doing and find all the necessary details that you might need. So without further ado, let's get started with the live coding. The plan is quite simple. It's a part of a more extensive tutorial, which is available on shiny.fluent page. We'll start with a simple Hello World application. Then we'll see how to display some data available in the package using a component from Fluent UI. We'll also add a simple input and see how it can be used to dynamically filter data in the table. And lastly, we'll see how some CSS, which comes with the package, can be used to define nice cards to visually separate elements of our dashboard. So let's get started. First of all, I will need to include the libraries. In this case, just Shiny and shiny.fluent. My whole UI will be wrapped in a Fluent page function. It's not necessary to use it. The components will work without it. However, if you build full interface based on shiny.fluent, it is recommended to use it because it sets some sensible defaults and so on. Inside it, I will use one of the simplest components available, which is called text. And I will just say hello in a large font. So already with a simple example, you can see some basics of the package. So each component is just a simple function, just like you would use a div or span HTML elements. The package comes with a set of components which are created by calling the respective function. And unnamed arguments basically become children of the component. Named arguments become its attributes or properties. The list of all available properties is available in the documentation. And I will show you how to use it later on. So for this hello world, we will also need a simple server function, which will do nothing for now. And we need to wrap everything in Shiny app. And that's it. We should be able to run it. And there we go. We can see a simple hello message in large font, which is also set by Fluent UI, so it will fit with all the other fonts which are used across the package. So we have a hello world. Let's go to the second point. So let's see how to explore some data which is available in the package using some components from Fluent UI. So in the package, there are two data sets, and I'm right now interested in this second one called Fluent Sales Bills. If we take a look at this, it's simply a data frame of imaginary sales bills. Each sales bill has some place where it was signed, it has some amount and a sales representative assigned to it. We won't need to go into details now. I just would like to display this in a simple component for a table. So whenever you want to find some suitable component to display something in your application, a good way to do that is to go to demo.appsilon.com, and there is this Shiny dashboard built with Fluent UI application, which is actually a Shiny Fluent application, which also serves as a showcase for all the components which are available in the package. Each component comes with example in R how to use it. And in this case, I'm interested in something called details list. You can see the live example here and some R code which produces it at the bottom. So if you take a look, in this example, we are just passing items and columns. So the items is the data to be displayed, and the columns can be used to configure how it should be displayed exactly. So first of all, let me try to use this component without any additional configuration. So I will simply add a details list to my UI with Fluent sales deals as the items. And now let's try to run the app, and we can see already that the table is displayed with all the columns that we just saw a moment ago in the data frame. So I would like to configure this a bit to display only some selected columns. If you take a look at the example, it uses a list of lists, but actually the package is quite flexible. You can use a data frame too, and this is what I'm going to do. So I'll just include people for this. And I will create a simple data frame with 2 columns. First of all, the field name, which are the columns to be used. And secondly, a column called name, which will provide some more human readable names for each of the columns. So this is it. I will now pass this to our details list. And after refreshing the app, you can already see that we only display the columns which we just defined here. So before we move on, I would like to change 2 additional things. So first of all, I will make this into an actual title, this hello message. And maybe decrease the font. So now you might wonder, how do I know what to use for variant? So another very useful resource for learning about components is the official documentation. This is what you will find when you search for Fluent UI in Google. And we're interested in this web controls part. I can search for any component here, and it provides us with an extensive documentation for each component. And even if you don't know much about JavaScript, you should be able to understand most of it. And in this case, you can see that I can use large as one of the variants, which is smaller than mega. And after refreshing, we have a smaller title. One additional thing that we'd like to change are these checkboxes. I won't be using them, so I would like to hide them. And again, to learn how to do this, I will just search for this component which I'm using called details list. And now there's a long documentation here. So I'll try to find something related to checkboxes. And sure enough, there's something called checkbox visibility. And it takes type called checkbox visibility. If you take a look, it's actually a numeric value. And it turns out that if you want to hide checkboxes, you need to provide it with 2. So this is what I'm going to do. Let's go back to our application. And after refreshing, the checkboxes are gone, so I'm satisfied. All right. So next, I would like to add a simple input and use it to dynamically filter the deals that we see listed here. So here comes the third resource, which is very useful when working with this package. It is the official documentation. It's the same thing that you can access also directly within R. So we can go to reference, and one of the simplest components in existence are toggles, which just provide a Boolean true or false value. And as we go here, we can see something interesting. So there's actually toggle, and there's also toggle shiny input. And to learn more about what that means, I recommend reading this topic guide, React in Shiny. This is a description which tells you what are those .shiny input components. But in short, the world of React and Shiny are vastly different. There is no concept of inputs and outputs in React. Anything that has kind of value, the value can be accessed using so-called on-change handlers. Sometimes they are called differently. However, for the most common cases, we created special wrappers which simplify that interface so that it feels more natural when used in Shiny. And for anything that has .shiny input wrapper, you can expect that you can just pass an input ID as the first value, and optionally an initial value as the value argument, and it will behave just like any other Shiny input. So the same applies to our toggle here. So let's try to first put it in our UI. And I will just provide it with a simple ID like include open and a label. Let's see what happens with our app. So you can see that now we have a toggle, which does nothing yet because we did not implement it in the server. My idea is that I want to show only closed deals by default, but when I switch this toggle, I want to see everything. So to do that, first of all, I will need to render this list dynamically because right now it's just placed in UI. So I will cut this and replace it with a UI output. And here on the server, I will now render it dynamically. So hopefully it should still work the same. But now I can use this I can replace this piece with something dynamic. And I will define a filtered deals reactive value, which will store filtered deals. So what I want to do is simply pipe this into a filter function from dplyr. So let's also add it. And I want to include all closed deals, but if the toggle is on, I also want to include open deals. So as you can see, I'm referring to the value of that input simply by using input $, and the ID which I provided here in the UI portion. So now I can use this reactive instead. And after refreshing, we have some problem. Okay, I had that mistake there. Okay, so now we have, as you can see, we only are showing closed deals, but if I switch this toggle, we have also the open deals. So this is what I wanted to achieve. Let's go back to our plan. The last thing that I would like to do is to show you how to use some CSS, which is available as part of the package. So if you go back to the documentation here, what you can see, there are controls which we are looking at right now. There are also styles. And there are a few interesting things here. I want to take a look at elevation. If you take a read at this page, you will learn that Fluent UI comes with classes which can be applied pretty much to any HTML component. And they will provide you with this kind of shadow effect, which can be used to define nice looking cards. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. But I also want to use a cool component called stack, which is basically a div with superpowers. So it can hold any kind of components and elements, but it also has really useful configuration options for things like padding, alignment, spacing between children, and so on. So what I'd like to do in my simple app is, first of all, I want to wrap this title and the table in a card using the stack component. So let me do just that. And I will provide the class here called MS.Dev8, just like we checked it a moment ago. And after refreshing, you can already see that there is some thin border around this whole table. So this is nice, but I would also like to add some padding between this border and the content. And for that, I will use a feature of Stack called tokens, which is one of those cool features which are mentioned. And in a list, I can provide a few things. In this case, I will want to add some padding and also some gap between the children of the stack. After refreshing, you can see that we now have some padding here and also some space between these things. So this is really cool. I would now like to also add such cards for the filters here. And to do that, I will define a simple helper function, which will take any HTML we want and also an optional title. And I will use this code as a basis for this function. So I want the title to be optional. So let's make it like this. And this UI output gets replaced with the content that we want. So now with this refactoring, I can replace this whole thing with my newly defined function. Hopefully it should look exactly the same, and it does. So now I can use this function to also create a card for filters. So let's add the title. Let's see if it works. Yes, it does. So now we have two separate cards, one for filters, the other one for sales bills details. Maybe one last thing that I'd like to do here is to limit the length of this table and show a scroll bar if necessary. So this shows another cool feature of the whole package. You can basically mix and match the components, plain HTML elements, and also any kind of components coming from other packages. So in this case, I will just wrap this UI output in a simple div, and slightly hacky, but I will just add a simple inline style to limit the height and show a scroll bar when necessary. And this is it. You can see now the length of this card is limited. There is a scroll bar. The filters still work. So this is pretty much it. That's all what I wanted to show for this simple demo. It's a very short version. A full tutorial includes adding more kinds of inputs and also outputs like a diagram and showing things on the map. Second part of the tutorial also contains things like adding a dashboard layout with a navigation panel, with a header and footer, and so on. But this is just a very short introduction to show you how easy it can be to start with just some basic components and how you can use the various resources to learn about them and play with them. So this is it for this panel. Thank you so much for participating.